By the fourth night, I had two theories. Either the new guy at my gym was following me, or I was starting to hope he was. My name is Logan Hayes. I am 28, and until Carter Blake showed up, my weekday routine was painfully predictable. I worked as a UX designer at a software company in Portland, spent most of the day staring at screens, left the office around 6:30, and reached my neighborhood gym shortly after 7. I liked predictability. Same locker area, same 10-minute warm-up, same general order of exercises. It meant I could stop thinking for an hour after spending an entire workday making decisions. Then, on a Monday evening, I noticed Carter for the first time. He was tall, dark-haired, probably around 30, with the calm expression of someone who never seemed rushed. I noticed him because he chose the treadmill beside mine even though several others were available. That was not strange by itself. People did that all the time. I forgot about him until Tuesday, when I walked toward the dumbbell area and found him training about 15 feet away. Wednesday, he was stretching near the station I always used after my workout. Thursday was when coincidence started feeling like a pattern. I entered the gym at exactly 7:12 p.m., scanned my membership card, and looked across the room. Carter was already there. He glanced up almost immediately. Our eyes met for maybe 2 seconds before he gave me a small nod. I nodded back and headed toward the locker room, pretending the encounter meant nothing. The problem was that I had already started looking for him before I saw him. That bothered me more than his repeated appearances did. During my warm-up, Carter took the treadmill beside mine again. "Evening," he said. "Hey." That was our entire conversation. He did not ask my name. He did not invade my space. He simply started running while I tried very hard not to notice that I had increased my pace for absolutely no reason. 20 minutes later, I moved to the weight floor. Carter remained behind. I told myself that proved everything was normal. Then, halfway through my second exercise, I looked toward the water station and saw him filling his bottle. He caught me looking. This time he smiled. I looked away so quickly that I nearly forgot what repetition I was on. By the end of my workout, I had constructed several explanations. Maybe we had similar schedules. Maybe he followed the same training program. Maybe Portland contained exactly one gym where two people could accidentally occupy the same 50 feet of space 4 nights in a row. I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the exit. Carter was near the stretching area, talking briefly with one of the trainers. I told myself not to look back. I looked back anyway. Carter was watching me leave. He did not wave. He just gave me that same quiet smile. Outside, the Portland air was cool and damp, and I stood beside my car feeling ridiculous. If his attention genuinely bothered me, I could change my schedule by 30 minutes and probably never see him again. Instead, before driving home, I checked the time on my phone. 8:26 p.m. Then I caught myself thinking about tomorrow. Specifically, whether Carter would be there at 7. That was when I understood the real problem. I was not worried that the new guy might be following my routine. I was worried that one day he might stop. Friday should have proved that I was imagining the whole thing, but instead it made the pattern harder to ignore. I arrived at 7:08 p.m., 4 minutes earlier than the night before, and Carter was standing near the water station filling a stainless steel bottle. He looked up as I entered, and that familiar half-smile appeared. "You are early," he said when I passed him. I stopped. "Early?" Carter seemed to realize what he had admitted. "Compared with yesterday. You remember when I got here yesterday?" "Apparently." He smiled, then walked toward the weight floor before I could decide whether that answer was strange or flattering. I spent the next 10 minutes telling myself that remembering one arrival time meant nothing. Then I went to the treadmill I usually used, the one at the end of the row closest to the large ceiling fan. Carter was 2 machines away. The treadmill beside mine was occupied, which somehow made me disappointed. That reaction was becoming embarrassing. When the other person finished, Carter did not move closer. For reasons I could not explain, that disappointed me too. I finished my warm-up and headed toward the weight floor. Carter was already there, but he kept a comfortable distance and focused on his own routine. Nothing about his behavior was intrusive. If anything, I was the one monitoring him. I knew when he changed exercises. I noticed when he refilled his water. I even noticed that he always wiped down equipment twice before moving on. Halfway through my workout, I walked toward the stretching area and found Carter finishing there. "You always use this spot," he said. "Do I?" "Usually." I crossed my arms. "You notice a lot." Carter looked briefly amused. "Occupational habit." "What occupation requires knowing where strangers stretch?" That sounds worse when you say it like that. I laughed despite myself. He stepped aside, leaving me the mat closest to the wall. You prefer this one. I stared at him. Okay, that is officially specific. Sorry. For the first time, Carter actually looked embarrassed. I work in physical therapy. I pay attention to how people move. Sometimes that turns into noticing routines. That explains something, although not everything. So you analyze everyone at the gym? Not everyone. The answer came too quickly. Carter seemed to hear it at the same moment I did. He cleared his throat and reached for his bottle. Have a good workout, Logan. I froze. Wait. He turned. How do you know my name? Carter pointed toward my chest. I looked down and remembered I was still wearing the temporary visitor badge from my office because I had forgotten to remove it after a client meeting. Logan Hayes was printed across it in large black letters. I felt my face warm. Right. Mystery solved. I am Carter, by the way. I know. Now it was his turn to look surprised. I nodded toward the gym app open on the tablet beside the stretching station. His name had appeared when he checked into a class earlier. Carter laughed. So we are both observant. Apparently. He headed toward the locker room, and I began stretching, still smiling. The following Monday, I arrived at 7:11 p.m. Carter was already on the weight floor. Tuesday, he appeared at 7:16. Wednesday, I found him near the treadmills at 7:05. By then, I knew his schedule almost as well as I suspected he knew mine. I also discovered something I did not want to admit. When Carter was nearby, the gym felt different. Less like a place I went to shut off my brain and more like somewhere something might happen. Then Thursday came. I finished work late and did not reach the gym until 7:42 p.m. I expected Carter to be halfway through his workout. Instead, when I walked inside, he was sitting near the lobby with his gym bag beside him. He looked at the clock, then at me. Long day, he asked. I stared at him for a second. Were you waiting for someone? Carter stood, picked up his bag, and gave me that quiet smile again. Maybe. Carter's answer stayed in my head long after we left the lobby. Maybe. It was one word, delivered with a smile, but it followed me through my entire workout. Carter did not explain it. Instead, he walked beside me toward the weight floor as if waiting nearly 40 minutes for my arrival was completely normal. You could have started without me, I said. I could have. But you did not. Apparently not. I glanced at him. You say apparently a lot when you do not want to explain yourself. Carter laughed. You notice a lot too. That was becoming difficult to deny. We separated for our routines, but the comfortable distance between us felt different now. I knew he was there, and I knew he knew I was there. Halfway through my second set of squats, I felt the familiar discomfort in my left knee. It was not serious, just an old irritation that occasionally returned after long days sitting at my desk. I shifted my weight without thinking and finished the repetition. When I stood upright, Carter was about 20 feet away, looking in my direction. He waited until I stepped away from the rack before approaching. Does your left knee bother you? He asked. I stared at him. How did you know that? You shifted toward your right side on the last 2 repetitions. You saw that from over there? Physical therapist, remember? I thought you were supposed to stop working when you left. Work. I have tried. His expression became more serious. I'm not trying to interfere. If it hurts, though, you might want to reduce the load tonight. I looked toward the weights, then back at him. It is an old issue. Mostly stiffness. Carter nodded. Does it bother you after sitting for a long time? Sometimes. And stares. Only after a harder workout. He gestured toward an open area nearby, but kept his distance. There is another movement you could use tonight that might be more comfortable. I can show you if you want. The fact that he asked instead of simply taking over made it easy to say yes. Carter demonstrated the movement without touching me, explaining the position in simple terms. I copied him carefully. My knee felt noticeably better. That is actually good, I admitted. You sound surprised. I was prepared for your mysterious gym expertise to be completely fictional. That would be an unnecessarily complicated way to meet someone. Meet someone. The phrase landed differently than it should have. Is that what this is? I asked. Carter paused. What? Meeting someone. His expression softened, but before he could answer, one of the trainers called his name from across the room. Carter glanced over, then back at me. Maybe we are still figuring that out. He walked away, leaving me with another maybe and far too much to think about. For the rest of the evening, I caught myself smiling whenever I remembered it. Before leaving, I found Carter near the water station. Thanks for the knee advice. Anytime. I hesitated. Do you watch everyone this closely? Carter looked directly at me. For once, there was no joking in his expression. No. That single word felt much more dangerous than maybe. I drove home through light Portland rain, trying to convince myself I had misunderstood him. The next morning, I failed completely. By 6:30 that evening, I was already watching the clock at work. At 7:06 p.m., I walked into the gym and automatically searched for Carter. I found him near the front desk, laughing with a man I had never seen before. The stranger rested an easy hand on Carter's shoulder while Carter smiled at him with a familiarity that immediately tightened something in my chest. I stopped walking. Until that moment, I had been asking why Carter noticed me. Suddenly, a much worse question replaced it. What if I had mistaken simple kindness for something that was never mine to begin with? I told myself the man at the front desk meant nothing, which would have been much more convincing if I had not spent the next 40 minutes noticing every time Carter spoke to him. They seemed comfortable together. The stranger was around Carter's age, dressed in workout clothes, and apparently capable of making Carter laugh without effort. I hated how quickly my imagination supplied an explanation. Boyfriend. Date. Someone Carter had known long before he started noticing the guy who always used the treadmill near the fan. Carter eventually spotted me across the gym and smiled. Normally, that smile would have improved my mood. That night, I only nodded and turned toward the weight floor. I finished my routine faster than usual, remembered Carter's advice about my knee, and left without stopping at the stretching area. The next day, I made a decision that I insisted was practical. I would work out earlier. Not because I was jealous. Not because I had spent half the night wondering whether Carter was seeing someone. I simply wanted to prove that my schedule belonged to me. I arrived at 6:18 p.m. The gym was busier than usual, but Carter was nowhere in sight. At first, I felt relieved. I completed my warm-up without wondering whether he was watching. I moved through the weight floor without anticipating his quiet smile. Nobody commented on which stretching mat I preferred. Nobody noticed when I adjusted my left leg. Everything was exactly as it had been before Carter arrived. I hated it. At 6:54, I looked toward the entrance. At 7:03, I checked again. At 7:11, I was pretending to read something on my phone while keeping the front doors in my peripheral vision. Carter never appeared. By 7:25, I had finished everything I planned to do, yet I remained near the stretching area for another 10 minutes. That was when the truth became impossible to avoid. I had changed my schedule to avoid Carter, then spent the entire workout waiting for him. The following evening, I tried something different. I arrived at 7:27. Carter was on a treadmill. He noticed me immediately, but instead of smiling, he looked confused. I gave him a quick nod and headed toward the locker room. When I returned, he had moved to the weight floor. We passed each other near the water station. Everything okay? He asked. Fine. I did not see you yesterday. I came early. Carter nodded slowly. Right. There was something almost disappointed in his expression, and seeing it gave me an embarrassing amount of satisfaction. Changing things up? He asked. Maybe. Carter smiled faintly. Now you are using my word. Apparently. That made him laugh, and for a few seconds, everything felt normal again. Then the man from the previous night walked through the entrance and waved at Carter. My good mood disappeared instantly. Carter waved back. I tightened the cap on my water bottle. Friend of yours? I asked before common sense could stop me. Carter glanced toward him. Ryan? Yes. We go back a few years. Oh. I tried to make the word sound neutral. It did not. Carter studied my face. Why? No reason. Logan. What? His expression shifted into quiet amusement. Nothing. I walked away before he could see how ridiculous I felt. Friday, I arrived at 6:52. Monday, 7:21. Tuesday, 6:47. I told myself I was breaking the pattern, but every time I entered, my eyes searched for Carter first. Sometimes he was already there. Sometimes he arrived later. Each time he did, I felt the same unreasonable relief. By Wednesday evening, I had begun to suspect that changing my schedule was accomplishing the opposite of what I intended. I was thinking about Carter more, not less. At 7:19, I finished filling my bottle and turned around. Carter was standing several feet away, his expression serious but gentle. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. He hesitated just long enough to make my pulse quicken. Why are you avoiding me? I should have expected Carter to notice. After all, noticing things seemed to be his specialty. Still, Hearing the question out loud made every excuse I had prepared sound ridiculous. I am not avoiding you, I said. Carter looked toward the clock on the wall, then back at me. Last week you came in around 7 every night. This week you have been here at 6:52, 7:21, 6:47, and now 7:19. I stared at him. You remember all of that? That is not helping my case, is it? A reluctant smile escaped me. Not really. Carter shifted slightly, leaving plenty of space between us as other people moved past the water station. If I did something that made you uncomfortable, tell me. I can give you more space. The sincerity in his voice immediately made me feel guilty. Whatever Carter was doing, he had never crossed a line. I was the one turning a few smiles and conversations into an entire private drama. You did not do anything wrong. Then why change your schedule? Work has been unpredictable. Carter raised an eyebrow. For days in a row? UX design is a dangerous profession. He laughed, but his eyes stayed on mine. Logan. I sighed. Fine. I thought maybe I was reading something wrong. Reading what wrong? There was no graceful way out. You. Carter became very still. I continued before I could reconsider. You keep showing up around the same time. You remember where I stretch, when I arrive, what my knee does during squats. Then I saw you with Ryan, and I realized maybe you were just friendly and observant with everyone. Carter blinked once. Ryan. The guy from the front desk. Understanding crossed his face, followed by a smile he clearly tried to hide. You changed your workout schedule because of Ryan? When you say it like that, it sounds unreasonable. Ryan is my cousin. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course he is. Carter laughed softly. He helped me move to Portland 2 months ago. He lives about 15 minutes from here. That explains the shoulder thing. The shoulder thing? I am going to stop talking now. Probably too late. I looked at him, expecting teasing, but his expression had softened. For what it is worth, he said, you were not imagining everything. My pulse seemed to become louder than the music playing through the gym speakers. What does that mean? Carter glanced toward the weight floor, then back at me. It means I noticed when you stopped coming at 7. You already made that extremely clear. No, I mean I noticed because 7 was the part of my day I started looking forward to. For once, I had absolutely nothing clever to say. Carter gave me a small, almost nervous smile. I know that probably sounds strange. Not as strange as changing my schedule to avoid you, and then spending the entire workout checking the entrance to see if you showed up. Carter stared at me. Now I was the one who had revealed too much. You were looking for me? He asked. Maybe. His smile widened. That word again. Do not make me regret saying it. I will try. We stood there for another moment, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of treadmills, weights, and conversations, yet the gym suddenly felt strangely quiet. Carter finally lifted his water bottle. Are you training legs tonight? That was the plan. How is your knee? Better. Good. He started to walk away, then stopped. Same time tomorrow? The sensible answer would have been to tell him I would come whenever my schedule allowed. Instead, I smiled. 7. The next evening, I arrived at 6:58 p.m. Carter walked through the doors less than 2 minutes later. He saw me waiting near the treadmills and laughed. That was when another uncomfortable truth occurred to me. I had spent days wondering why Carter kept adjusting his routine around mine. Now I had just arrived early to make sure I would be there when he did. For the first time since Carter had joined the gym, neither of us pretended our timing was accidental. At exactly 7, we started our warm-up on neighboring treadmills, and the difference was almost funny. Before, I had spent 20 minutes wondering whether he had chosen the machine beside mine deliberately. Now Carter simply pointed at it and asked, "Taken?" Unfortunately, I said, I was hoping for some peace tonight. I can use one farther away. Do not make this weird. Carter smiled and stepped onto the treadmill. I am definitely the one making it weird. We talked between stretches of comfortable silence. I learned that Carter had moved to Portland 2 months earlier after accepting a position at a physical therapy clinic about 3 miles from the gym. He had grown up in Colorado, spent several years working in Seattle, and moved south because he wanted a slower pace without giving up the Pacific Northwest. And Ryan? I asked. Carter looked amused. Still my cousin. I was only confirming. You seem very interested in that information. I care about accurate family records. Carter laughed so loudly that a woman 2 treadmills away glanced over. After our warm-up, we separated for different exercises, but the strange awareness between us remained. Later, while I rested near the stretching area, Carter joined me. "Can I tell you something without making you uncomfortable?" he asked. The question immediately made me nervous, but his tone was careful. "You can try." He leaned against the wall several feet away. "The first time I noticed you, it actually was because of your knee." "That is romantic." "I am not finished." I smiled. "Go ahead." "You were doing squats, and you shifted your weight. I noticed because of work. The next day, I saw you again and wanted to make sure you were not making it worse. So you really were monitoring me." "For about 2 days. And after that," Carter looked down at his water bottle, and for the first time since I had met him, he seemed genuinely uncertain about what to say. "After that, the knee stopped being the reason." My heartbeat quickened. "What became the reason?" He looked at me again. "You." The answer was so simple that I almost laughed from nerves. Carter continued. "I like seeing you here. You always arrived looking like your workday had taken everything out of you, and about 20 minutes later, you looked like yourself again. You thanked the staff every night. You always moved your towel if someone needed space. You smiled at people even when you clearly wanted to be left alone." I stared at him. "You noticed all of that?" "That is the problem." "Why is it a problem?" "Because eventually I started choosing 7 o'clock because I knew you would probably be here." There it was. No mystery. No complicated explanation. Carter had adjusted his routine around mine because he wanted to see me. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt exposed because I had done exactly the same thing. "So when you waited in the lobby that night?" "I was waiting for you." "For 40 minutes?" 34. That correction does not help. "I know." I laughed, and Carter relaxed. Then he asked, "Does any of this bother you?" I thought about how carefully he had kept his distance, how he had asked before offering advice, and how easily he had offered to give me space when he thought I was uncomfortable. "No," I said. "It probably should make things awkward, but it does not." Carter smiled. "Good." I hesitated, knowing I was one sentence away from admitting something I had spent days hiding. "There is something you should know too." "What?" I looked toward the treadmills, then back at him. "You were not the only one arranging your schedule." Carter's expression changed immediately. "Logan." "Tomorrow," I said, standing before courage could abandon me. 7 o'clock. "You cannot leave after saying that." "Watch me." I started toward the locker room with a smile I could not hide, knowing that tomorrow Carter would finally hear the part of the story I had kept secret from him. I spent most of the next day regretting the dramatic way I had walked away from Carter. Leaving him with half a confession had seemed clever for about 5 minutes. By lunchtime, it felt ridiculous. At 6:57 p.m., I entered the gym and found Carter waiting near the treadmills with 2 bottles of water. 3 minutes early, he said. "You are keeping track again. You created suspense and disappeared." I earned the right. He handed me 1 bottle, and I accepted it with a smile. "Fine. You want the truth?" "Very much." We started walking slowly on neighboring treadmills. I looked straight ahead because looking at Carter suddenly felt harder than running. "I noticed what you were doing earlier than I admitted." "How early?" "Probably the 4th night." "And you thought I was following you?" "I thought you were either following my routine or we had the world's most specific coincidence." Carter looked embarrassed. "That sounds terrible." "It would have been, except you never bothered me. You never followed me outside the gym. You never pushed for personal information. You just kept appearing nearby. That was intentional." "I know that now." I took a breath. "Here is the part one did not tell you. Once I realized you might be showing up because of me, I started making sure I arrived at the same time." Carter nearly missed a step, caught himself, and looked at me. "Seriously? Do not make me repeat it." "Logan, you changed your schedule this week to avoid me, after I thought Ryan was your boyfriend." Carter laughed. "My cousin ruined everything without even knowing he was involved. Before that, I was leaving work at exactly 6:30 because I knew I could get here around 7. Carter stared at me with such obvious surprise that I finally looked over. "You like seeing me?" he asked. "I liked knowing you would be here." His expression softened. "That is not exactly the same answer. It is the answer you are getting while I am on a treadmill." We finished our warm-up, but neither of us seemed interested in our usual routines. We moved to a quiet bench near the lobby where people came and went around us. Carter rested his water bottle between his hands. So we were both changing our schedules for each other. "Apparently." "You used my word again. It belongs to both of us now." He smiled, then became thoughtful. "I want to be clear about something. If I ever made you uncomfortable, I am sorry." You did not. I mean it. I know. That is probably why I liked it. Carter went silent. I immediately wished I could pull the sentence back. You liked it? He asked. Do not look so pleased with yourself. I am trying very hard not to. You are failing. Completely. I laughed, and the last bit of tension disappeared. For weeks, I had treated Carter's attention like a puzzle I needed to solve. The answer turned out to be embarrassingly simple. He wanted to see me, and I wanted to see him. Carter glanced toward the gym floor. Can I ask one more question? You have already survived several. What happens now? I looked at the treadmills, the water station, and the stretching area where this strange routine had built itself one ordinary evening at a time. Maybe we stop pretending these are coincidences. I can do that. Good. Carter stood, then hesitated. And maybe tomorrow we do something that does not involve treadmills. I looked up at him. Is that your way of asking me out? I was hoping to work up to that. You have been working up to it for weeks. Carter smiled. Then I should probably stop wasting time. The next evening, Carter proved he had understood exactly what I meant. He did not suggest another workout. Instead, he waited until we reached the lobby and asked, Do you want to get coffee somewhere that does not sell protein powder by the pound? I laughed. Are you insulting the gym cafe? I am saying fluorescent lighting should not be part of a first date. Hearing him call it a date made my stomach do something ridiculous. Coffee sounds good. We agreed to meet Saturday afternoon at a small coffee shop on the east side of Portland. That gave me approximately 36 hours to discover that seeing Carter outside the gym made me far more nervous than seeing him beside me on a treadmill. Saturday arrived gray and cool, with the kind of light rain Portland barely acknowledged. I reached the coffee shop 5 minutes early and immediately wondered whether that made me look too interested. Then Carter walked through the door 7 minutes early, saw me, and smiled. You are early again. So are you. I had a reason. Traffic? You. I stared at him. You really stopped being subtle. You told me to stop pretending. I may regret that. Carter was dressed simply in dark jeans, a navy sweater, and a light jacket. Without workout clothes and a water bottle in his hand, he seemed strangely unfamiliar. I probably did too. This is weird, I admitted after we ordered. Good weird or bad weird? Good. I have just never seen you sitting still this long. I can leave and walk past the table every 10 minutes if that helps. Please do not. We found a table near the window. At first, conversation came in cautious pieces, but soon we were talking more easily than we ever had at the gym. Carter told me about his physical therapy work and why he had chosen it after seeing how much patient, practical support could change someone's daily life. I told him about UX design, impossible client requests, and the strange satisfaction of fixing a problem most users would never realize had existed. So you notice small things too, he said. Only professionally. Carter gave me a look. And maybe occasionally at the gym. We talked about Portland, favorite restaurants, weekend hikes, terrible movies, and the fact that Carter had already learned more coffee shops in 2 months than I had in 6 years. Eventually, I realized nearly 2 hours had passed. Neither of us had looked at the time. Outside, the rain had stopped. We walked several blocks without deciding where we were going. At a corner, Carter slowed. Can I admit something? That depends on how embarrassing it is. I was worried this would not work. I looked at him. What would not work? Us outside the gym. Maybe I only knew how to talk to you when there was exercise equipment nearby. You have been doing fine. So have you. I smiled. I was worried too. Carter's shoulders relaxed. Really? I spent 10 minutes deciding whether arriving 5 minutes early looked desperate. I arrived 7 minutes early. Then you were more desperate. That seems mathematically fair. We both laughed. At the next intersection, our hands brushed accidentally. Neither of us moved away immediately. Carter looked at me, giving me enough time to decide what I wanted. I turned my hand slightly and let my fingers rest against his. He gently took my hand. The gesture was simple, quiet, and somehow more meaningful than all those weeks of wondering. We walked another block like that before Carter said, Same time next Saturday? I looked at him. You are already scheduling date too? I like reliable routines. I noticed. He smiled. Is that a yes? I squeezed his hand once. 7 days is a long time. Carter raised an eyebrow. Tomorrow, then? Now you are learning. A month later, 7 o'clock no longer felt like a coincidence. It had become ours. On Monday evening, I reached the gym at 6:59 p.m. and found Carter standing outside the entrance, holding 2 coffees. That seems irresponsible before a workout, I said. One is decaf. Which one? I forgot. Excellent start. Carter handed me a cup, and we walked inside together. By then, everyone at the front desk knew we usually arrived at the same time. Ryan had even stopped pretending not to find the whole situation hilarious. The strangest part was how little had actually changed. I still worked long days designing software interfaces. Carter still spent his days helping patients at the physical therapy clinic. We still used the same treadmills, the same weight floor, and the same stretching area. My left knee still complained occasionally when I spent too many hours sitting at my desk. Carter still noticed before I said anything. But now he asked once and trusted my answer. We had found a rhythm that felt less like being watched and more like being known. Outside the gym, things were growing just as naturally. We had discovered a small Thai restaurant we both liked, spent one rainy Sunday wandering through a bookstore, and taken a Saturday hike outside Portland, where Carter somehow managed to get us temporarily confused about which trail returned to the parking lot. You told me you grew up hiking, I reminded him. I did. Then why are we standing beside the same tree for the second time? I like this tree. You are impossible. And yet you keep showing up. He was right. That was the part one liked most. Neither of us had made dramatic promises. We simply kept showing up. One evening after our workout, I was tying my shoes near the lobby when Carter walked past me toward the exit. See you tomorrow, he said. I looked up. Wait. He turned. What? I stood and grabbed my jacket. You are leaving without me? Carter smiled. I thought you were still getting ready. That has never stopped you from waiting before. Fair point. We stepped outside together into the cool Portland evening. Halfway across the parking lot, Carter moved a few steps ahead because his car was parked closer. I called after him. There you go again. He turned around. What? Making me follow you. Carter laughed. I thought I was the one with that reputation. You were. He walked backward a few steps, still facing me. What changed? I caught up with him. I figured out your secret. Which one? You were never particularly good at following me. Carter looked offended. I waited 34 minutes in a lobby once. Exactly. Very obvious. And you secretly liked it. I tried not to smile. Maybe. Still hiding behind that word? It has sentimental value. We reached his car, but neither of us immediately said goodbye. Carter leaned lightly against the door and looked at me with the same calm expression that had first caught my attention weeks earlier. Same time tomorrow? He asked. You already know the answer. I like hearing it. I smiled. 7 o'clock. Carter reached for my hand, and I let him take it. There had been a time when I thought his attention was a mystery I needed to solve. Then I thought it was something I might lose. Eventually, I understood that the best part was never being followed at all. It was being noticed by someone I had started noticing too. The next evening, I entered the gym at exactly 7. Carter was a few steps behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. You are doing it again. Doing what? Following me. Carter smiled. You keep letting me. I held the door open for him. Maybe I have my reasons. He walked through, waited until I joined him, and together we headed toward the treadmills. We were no longer two strangers arranging their schedules and pretending not to notice. Nobody was following anyone anymore. We had simply chosen the same direction. By the second month, Carter and I had stopped measuring our relationship by how often we happened to meet at the gym. There were Wednesday dinners after work, Saturday mornings at neighborhood coffee shops, and Sunday walks when Portland gave us a few dry hours between rain showers. Still, 7 o'clock remained our favorite habit. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Carter sent me a message that disrupted it. He had to stay late at the clinic because a patient appointment had been moved, and he would probably miss our workout. I read the message twice before reminding myself that normal adults could survive one evening without seeing each other. I arrived at the gym at 7:04 p.m. alone. For the first time in weeks, the treadmill beside mine stayed empty. The experience was strangely familiar. I remembered the evening when I had changed my schedule to avoid Carter, only to spend the entire workout watching the entrance. The difference now was that I knew exactly why I missed him. There was no mystery left to hide behind. I finished my warm-up and moved to the weight floor. Around 7:40, my phone buzzed. Carter had sent another message saying he was finally leaving work and hoped my knee was behaving. I smiled at the screen. He was not there, yet he had still noticed the thing that mattered. I replied that my knee was fine and told him to go home and get some rest. At 8:05, I finished stretching and walked toward the lobby. Carter was standing just inside the entrance. He was still wearing the navy polo from his clinic, his jacket folded over one arm. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Following you, apparently." I laughed. "You worked late." "I did. And I specifically told you to go home." "You did. You are terrible at instructions." "Occupational hazard." He held up a paper bag. "I brought dinner." "That improves your case." We did not work out. Instead, we sat at one of the small tables near the lobby and ate sandwiches while people moved around us. It was ordinary, almost embarrassingly so, but I realized I preferred that to some elaborate romantic gesture. Carter had not rushed across town because he believed I needed rescuing from an evening alone. He had come because he wanted to see me, even if only for 20 minutes. "You know," I said, "you did not have to come here." Carter nodded. "I know." "Then why did you?" He considered the question. "Because when something becomes important, I do not think showing up should depend on convenience." I looked at him for a moment. That sounded suspiciously thoughtful. "I have occasional moments." "Very occasional." He smiled, then his expression softened. "I mean it, Logan. I like this. Not just the gym. Not just dates. The ordinary parts too." Something about those words stayed with me. Most of my life had been built around routines. Because routines felt safe. Carter had somehow entered one of mine and changed what routine meant. It was no longer about protecting myself from uncertainty. It was about having someone I could count on without needing every day to be perfect. We finished eating and walked outside together. A light rain had started, and Carter opened an umbrella he kept in his car. As we crossed the parking lot, I moved closer beneath it. "Tomorrow at 7? He asked. "You just worked a 12-hour day and still came here. I think you have earned one night off." That was not my question. I smiled. "Yes, tomorrow at 7. Carter nodded, as if confirming an important appointment. But as we reached my car, another thought occurred to me. For weeks, Carter had been the one showing up for me. Maybe it was time I learned how to show up for him too. The next afternoon, I found myself thinking about Carter's words instead of the design review happening on my screen. Showing up should not depend on convenience. He had said it casually, but I knew enough about him now to understand that he lived that way. Carter remembered details. He made time. He listened. The problem was that I had grown comfortable being the person receiving those things. So when he messaged me shortly after 5:30 and said another late appointment had been added to his schedule, I made a decision. At 6:15, I shut down my computer, grabbed my jacket, and drove toward his clinic instead of going directly to the gym. I stopped at a small deli on the way and bought 2 turkey sandwiches, 2 bottles of water, and the oatmeal cookie Carter always claimed he did not want before eating half of mine. His clinic occupied the ground floor of a quiet medical building about 3 miles from the gym. I had never been there before. I waited outside rather than walking in because I did not want to interrupt his work. At 7:18 p.m., Carter came through the doors carrying his bag. He looked tired until he saw me leaning against my car. Then he stopped completely. "Logan, you are late." He looked at his phone. "You are at my workplace." Very observant. "Why?" I held up the paper bag. "Dinner." Carter stared at it. Then at me. "You skipped the gym?" "I thought about going without you." And the treadmill seemed emotionally unavailable. He laughed, but there was something different in his expression afterward, something quieter. "You did not have to do this." "I know." I repeated his words from the night before deliberately. Carter recognized them immediately. "That is unfair." "It sounded better when you said it." We sat at an outdoor table beneath the building's covered entrance while light rain tapped against the pavement a few feet away. Carter opened the bag and found the cookie. "You bought this for yourself, right?" "Obviously." "Good." He broke it in half and handed one piece to me. We ate while he told me about his day. Nothing dramatic had happened. A patient had needed extra time, paperwork had piled up, and one appointment had run longer than expected. I listened without trying to solve anything. When he finished, Carter looked across the table at me. "You really came all the way here just because I was working late?" "It is 3 miles from the gym, Carter. I did not cross the country." "You know what I mean." I did. I looked down at the wrapper in my hands. "Yesterday you said you like the ordinary parts." "I realized I do too. But I do not want you to be the only person making them matter." Carter was quiet for a moment. "You are not." "Maybe not. I just wanted you to know I can show up too." His smile was small, but it reached his eyes. "I know now." We stayed there until nearly 8, talking while the rain softened. Eventually, Carter checked the time. "The gym closes in a few hours. Are you suggesting we still work out?" "Absolutely not." Good. I was going to suggest coffee. After 8 at night? Decaf. You remembered this time? Probably. We drove separately to a coffee shop nearby and stayed until the employees began stacking chairs on empty tables. When we finally stepped outside, Carter stopped beside my car. Logan, there is something I have been trying not to rush. My smile disappeared, not from fear, but from the seriousness in his voice. What is it? Carter took a slow breath. I think this stopped being casual for me a while ago. I looked at him beneath the parking lot lights, realizing the same truth had been quietly growing inside me. Then maybe, I said, we should finally talk about what it has become. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Cars moved along the wet street behind us, and somewhere across the parking lot, a door closed, but Carter kept his eyes on me. I do not want to make this more complicated than it needs to be, he said. Then do not. He smiled faintly. That sounds like something you would say at work. I solve usability problems for a living. All right. Simple version. Carter took a breath. I want to be your boyfriend. I had imagined this conversation several times without admitting it to myself, and every imaginary version had involved uncertainty, careful wording, and at least one misunderstanding. Carter had reduced it to 8 words. That was surprisingly efficient. Logan. I know. I let him wait another second, mostly because I liked seeing the normally composed Carter nervous. Then I smiled. I want that too. His shoulders relaxed. You could have said that immediately. And missed this expression? You are enjoying this. A little. Carter laughed and reached for my hand. I took his without hesitation. There was no dramatic transformation after that moment. The parking lot looked the same. Portland was still damp and cold. I still had work waiting for me the next morning, and Carter still had an early patient at the clinic. But something inside me settled. For weeks, we had been circling around the same truth through schedules, treadmills, coffee, dinners, and quiet acts of attention. Now we had finally named it. The following evening, we met at the gym at 7 as usual. Carter was already near the entrance when I arrived. Boyfriend, he said, testing the word with obvious amusement. Do not make it weird. Too late. You have had the title for less than 24 hours. I plan to use it responsibly. That concerns me. We walked inside together, and our routine continued almost exactly as before. That was what surprised me most. Becoming official did not make the small things less meaningful. If anything, I noticed them more. Carter still remembered which treadmill I preferred. I still carried an extra bottle of water because he regularly forgot to refill his before leaving work. He checked on my knee without hovering. I learned when he needed conversation and when a difficult day required 10 quiet minutes first. A week later, we were sitting in my apartment eating takeout after work when Carter noticed an old framed photograph on a shelf. You have lived here a while? Almost 4 years. Do you like it? I do. He nodded, but something in his expression made me curious. Why? No reason. I was thinking about how strange it is that I moved to Portland without knowing anyone except Ryan. And now this already feels more like home than Seattle did. I looked at him. Because of the rain? Definitely not. The coffee? Partly. Your glamorous gym membership? Carter smiled. Mostly one person I met there. I lowered my takeout container. That was dangerously sincere. I can take it back. Too late. He leaned back against the couch, smiling, and I realized I understood exactly what he meant. Carter had entered my life through something as ordinary as a workout schedule, but the ordinary parts were becoming the foundation of something neither of us wanted to rush. Later that night, as he prepared to leave, he paused at my door. 7 tomorrow? He asked. I smiled because somehow he still asked, even though we both knew the answer. 7 tomorrow. After he left, I looked at the clock and realized something had changed without either of us noticing when it happened. I was no longer planning my evenings around the possibility of seeing Carter. I was planning a life that naturally included him. 3 months after Carter first chose the treadmill beside mine, I walked into the gym at 7:06 p.m. and discovered that he was not there. Months earlier, that would have sent me into an embarrassing spiral of questions. Now I simply checked my phone. There was one message from him. Running late. Save my spot. I smiled and started warming up. At 7:14, Carter hurried through the entrance, spotted me, and pointed toward the treadmill beside mine. You saved it. Do not get emotional. I knew there was a romantic underneath all that sarcasm. 8 minutes late and already causing problems. Carter stepped onto the treadmill and smiled. You missed me. I survived. That was not my question. I looked straight ahead. Maybe. He laughed, and the sound felt as familiar now as the music playing through the gym speakers. We had been officially together for several weeks, and our lives had begun overlapping in small, practical ways. Carter kept coffee at his apartment that I actually liked. I had a spare phone charger for him because he constantly forgot his. Ryan invited me to family dinners without asking Carter first. Carter knew which days my design meetings ran late, and I knew which clinic days usually left him exhausted. Nothing about us felt dramatic, and I had stopped expecting love to announce itself dramatically. After our workout, we walked outside beneath a clear sky, unusual enough for Portland that both of us noticed. Carter stopped beside my car. I have something for you. That sounds suspicious. He reached into his gym bag and handed me a small key. I stared at it. What is this? My apartment. I looked up. Carter suddenly seemed nervous. Before you panic, I am not asking you to move in. You already spend enough time there that making you wait in the hallway when I am running late seems ridiculous. I turned the key between my fingers. It was such a simple object, but I understood what it meant. Trust. Access. A quiet invitation into more of his ordinary life. You are sure. Completely. This is a dangerous amount of responsibility. You design software used by thousands of people. Software does not complain if I eat its cereal. Carter laughed. Keep the key, Logan. I closed my hand around it. Okay. 2 weeks later, I gave him one to my apartment. We did not make a ceremony out of either moment. That was never our style. On the first Friday of spring, we skipped the gym and drove about 30 miles east of Portland for an evening walk along a quiet trail overlooking the Columbia River. The air was cool, the sky streaked with orange behind the hills. We stopped at an overlook and stood together. Without speaking for a while, Carter eventually looked at me. Do you ever think about how ridiculous this started? You mean when I thought you were following me? I was following your schedule. That distinction will definitely protect your reputation. He smiled. You know why I kept coming back? I do now. Why did you? I thought about the question. At first, I had returned because Carter made an ordinary place feel different. Then because I wanted answers. Later because I wanted him. But somewhere along the way, wanting to see Carter had become something quieter and stronger. I reached for his hand. Because being noticed by you made me realize how much I wanted to notice someone back. Carter squeezed my hand. That is dangerously sincere. I learned from you. We stayed until the light began fading, then headed back toward the car together. The next Monday, at exactly 7, we walked into the gym side by side. Carter pointed toward our usual treadmills. Same ones. I smiled. Same ones. The routine had never really been about repetition. It was about choice. Every evening we could have gone somewhere else, arrived at another time, or walked in separate directions. Instead, whenever life allowed it, we kept choosing the same place, the same hour, and most importantly, each other.